Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates post-game live. What to make of that? I am an eternal optimist. I like to take the positives in things, look ahead to what's possible and what's on the horizon, and try and take a glass half full approach to everything in life. But this Warrior team, it's hard to find positives. It's hard to find any optimism. It's hard to have any hope for what could be of the remainder of this Golden State season. This is a new low point. When you think it couldn't get any worse, the Warriors go out and lose 104-101 to the Toronto Raptors, a team that entered the game 8-31 on the season, a team that entered the game 1-16 in their last 17 games, and yet the Warriors could not get the job done. Their offense, again, woeful. You run out of adjectives to try and describe the Golden State Warrior offense. It is disgusting. I've been playing tennis this morning, right? Went out, had a hit before Warriors basketball. Something to enjoy before having to watch the grind of Golden State play. I was talking to a mate. He's a Warrior fan. He said, I haven't watched a game for a few weeks. And when I go and watch this game today, I kind of think, yeah, I probably wouldn't watch these games either. There's no enjoyment in this whatsoever. If I didn't have to do it for a living, I'm not sure I'd watch it. What pleasure, enjoyment are we getting out of this right now? You know, okay, cool. We get to watch Steph Curry. We should not take that for granted. Maybe that's the sole reason why I will continue to watch games, right? Along with analyzing and seeing what happens, I suppose, and the storylines revolving the team. But even watching Steph and watching him have to be face guarded and just struggle through having to deal with the likes of Davion Mitchell and the defenders that he comes up against every night without any ounce of offensive support, without another player on the roster who you can literally just throw the ball to and say, can you please get me a bucket? Can we please get a score on this possession without having to involve Steph whatsoever? Even watching Steph right now is difficult because you literally feel so bad for the guy that he has to go out there, face the defenses that he does, and not have the support around him to be able to really capitalize on that or just make things easier for a guy who's 36 years old, who's dealing with knee tendonitis, who's been dealing with a sprain in his thumb. I don't know. I got no other words. A few comments from you guys. Stan Decker says, so embarrassing. Lost to a team that's 8-31. Toronto were literally 1-15 in their last 16 games. No, they were 1-16 in their last 17, I believe. The Warriors are the cure to a lot of things. Yeah, absolutely. If you're on a losing streak right now in the NBA, geez, just hope Golden State are upcoming on your schedule because they will help you out. Oh, my goodness. Stan Decker says, time to cut off Buddy. Again, I'll just go down to it's what I've been saying the last couple of episodes. I don't hate Buddy Hield, the player. I think Buddy Hield can actually be a helpful piece for you in the right scenario. However, this is not the right scenario where he's a starter. The Warriors go super small in this game. Obviously, no Draymond, who was out through illness. So they start Steph, Schroeder, Hield. Right, those three together. Then Wiggins, Trace Jackson, Davis. But you should not be having this kind of offensive reliance on Buddy Hield where he's taking 13 shots, 10 three-point attempts, going 3 of 13, 2 of 10 for the game. You just should not be having this reliance. He can be a nice spark plug for you off the bench where he enters the game and he plays 5-10 minutes, and if he's got it rolling, absolutely keep pushing him through and he can play when he's hot. When he's not hot, just you need to have the roster in place to be able to say to yourself, okay, this guy just doesn't have it tonight. I'm benching him. Bring him back next game, see what he's got then, right? Because that's the thing with Buddy Hield. He's so hot and cold, is that you want to ride those hot stretches, as the Warriors did in the first 8 to 10 games of the season. And when he's cold, you just want to say, hey, buddy, you don't have it. So just sit for the night. The Warriors cannot do that because they're so reliant on Buddy Hield's offense that they have to play through his cold stretches. They're so reliant on his just like shooting ability because they just don't have much shooting on the roster that he has to play. Like, how many minutes did he play in this game? Just checking. 33 minutes. In what world? We are in 2025. In what world should Buddy Hield be playing 33 minutes in an NBA game? It's not a world I want to be part of anyway. That's disgusting. But again, it goes down to the reliance on this guy offensively, and the fact that the Warrior roster is set up like this. It's horrible. Like, coming into the season, I thought, okay, Buddy Hield might be a nice 15 to 18 minute a game bench guy. Sometimes when he's hot, you can roll him through for 20, 25 minutes. When he's cold, again, 8 to 10 minutes, see you later. You don't have it tonight, bench the guy. I didn't think in game 39 with, I don't even want, do you want to call it a deep rotation? Like, the Warriors played 10 guys again. Okay. I'm not even sure you want to call it deep. They've just got a bunch of guys that play, I suppose. None of them really at this point are actually that good. But regardless, like, how does Buddy Hield get 33 minutes? And again, I'm not sure it's a Steve Kerr issue. It's a Mike Dunleavy Jr., this roster issue, really. And the reliance on Buddy Hield, which is so disproportionate to his skill set and consistency nowadays as an NBA player. Anyway, FTW Clan says, we actually lost to a team at the bottom of the East, below 500 now too. Yeah, the Warriors 19 and 20 on the season. Just quickly on that, Golden State hit a new low point for the season. It feels almost appropriate that the Warriors' new low point of the season is inflicted by a former player, Chris Boucher, who I remind you played one game for the Warriors in 2018-19, played that whole year on a two-way contract after going undrafted 2017-18 it might have been. He went undrafted, signed a two-way contract with the Warriors, played one game for the franchise. So not only like a former player inflicting the Warriors' new low point of the season, but a stretch big. A stretch big who can shoot, who went, 3 of 5 from 3 in this game, who had 17 points in the fourth quarter after entering the fourth with 1 point through the first 3. A stretch big who we know the Warriors need one. Again, I'm sick and tired of watching these games and watching Kevon Looney and Trace Jackson-Davis just get the ball either in the mid-range area or at the top of the key, absolutely wide open. And, of course, they're having to run other actions, off-ball screens and stuff like that to try and get guys open, because we know those guys aren't, not only are they not going to shoot the ball, but they're not going to try and eat up the space and drive in and try and make a layup or do anything offensively scoring-wise. I'm sick of it. Literally sick of it. Just get a guy. His name is Nikola Vucevic. Get a guy who can actually make the defense respect their offensive game. Not just their shooting, but their actual offense. Their scoring ability. Goodness me. Young West says it could possibly be tank time soon. Did just write about it, actually. That it could be the draft lottery got confirmed today for May 12, I think, in Chicago. Could be scarily relevant for the Warriors. You got all these teams, Brooklyn, Toronto, even. A couple other teams in the East who are going to be, their futures could be up in the air come draft lottery night. The Warriors aren't one of those teams. They're still trying to fight. They've still got Steph Curry. They're still trying to battle they're just trying to battle for a play-in tournament spot right now. And then hopefully they can make the playoffs. But it's looking more and more inevitable that draft lottery night is going to be very big for the Warriors as part of their present and future. Because, I don't know, maybe they get a high-ish pick, a top 10 pick, and they can trade that. Who knows? But the fact that we're even thinking about that is pretty disgusting. JSW says, I'm still big on testing Quentin Post for at least one game to see how well a shooting big is on the team. Yeah, I've been against it. It was exciting to see against the Pacers. I've been against it because I think his defense just isn't up to scratch whatsoever. But I'm watching this game and really wondering how it could get possibly any worse. How could it get worse? And so at this point, if I'm Steve Kerr, I'm pretty much willing to try anything. Right? willing to try anything, and that is something reasonably significant in terms of just a different look at having a guy at the 5 out there who can shoot. And maybe you put Draymond next to him and he can try and fill up some of the issues that would come defensively, which is going to be the case anyway if you get a guy like Vucevic. FTW Clan says Green sitting out off 2 days of rest. Yes, apparently sick, unfortunately. I actually think, like, Draymond missing this game, obviously you feel his absence, but I actually think Kuminga right now is the one. Like, the Warrior offense is, it's barely believable that it's 2025 and this is what an NBA offense could look like. Of a team that has Steph Curry, anyway. Of a team that's trying to win games. Like, you see the worst offenses in the league, most of them are just bad teams who have no interest in winning, right? This team is legit trying to win. They've got one of the greatest players in the history of the game. To see the offense this bad, and not just the offense, but the way the roster's built. You look at the roster and it's blatantly obvious why they had these offensive issues. And Steve Kerr, credit to him, tried to take the heat in a post-game press conference, says it's my fault, right? It's my fault we're not executing. I'm not sure it is. I think it's the front office right now. And we were giving some plaudits to them earlier in the season, and that's what happens. Like, you win games, everyone gets plaudits. You lose games, everyone's bashing you. That's just the way it's going to be. But I think the further this goes, the more obvious it becomes that 12-3 start to the season was clearly the outlier in this season. And what we've seen over the past 24 games now are more so what this team is, and the concerns that we came into the season with in terms of the offense are well and truly there and clear for everyone to see. And so I think fault has to lie on Mike Dunleavy Jr. and the front office. Could Steve Kerr do more? Yeah, probably. Could the players do more? Absolutely. Like, can Buddy Hield just hit some shots sometime, please? Can Lindy Waters just hit some shots sometimes, please? Wiggs was okay today, 20 points. Probably needs to be more involved, though. So, yeah, the players have just got to hit some shots. Steve's probably got to get them some better looks. But you look up and down this roster is just fundamentally flawed, particularly from an offensive standpoint. Thendek says this team is physically weak, no strength, no speed, just forcing threes. There's no chemistry. Things need to change. When JK comes back, we may be too far behind, like something needs to happen. I've said that. You wait till the deadline. You wait to the 24 hours before the deadline, and we're going to be in a similar situation to last season where we're 5 games behind 500, and doesn't matter what you do from there on. You could probably you could win 80% of your games from there on, like they did almost like over the last 39 games of last season where they went 27-12. You're too far behind at that point. The West is too competitive. There's too many good teams in the West to make up for it. FTW Clan says, I think we beat the Heat, Pacers, and Raptors if Kuminga was playing. Possibly. Yeah, possibly. But I don't know. I don't want to delve into too many hypotheticals. It's just really disappointing that he got injured when he did. Brody says, haven't been around here in a while. I just can't stand watching this team anymore. I don't blame you. I want you guys in the chat. I want as many people viewing this as possible and interacting. But I don't actually blame people for tuning out. And it's a very simple thing in life. Like, we try and dive into things that make us happy and things that are enjoyable, and try to steer clear of things that aren't enjoyable, right? And so a lot of fans will say, I'm a fan through thick and thin. Like, I'm there through all the bad times, and the people that aren't there through the bad times don't enjoy the good times. And I'm very much like somewhat of that opinion that, you got to be there through the bad times to enjoy the good times. I get it. But in terms of interacting with content, for example, like, I don't blame you guys for watching a Warrior game and thinking, I do not want to even hear a bar about that game because it was so disgusting. I saw it with my very own eyes. I don't need to, right? As opposed to 12-3 start to the season through the first 15 games, we do these post-game lives, and I can understand why a heap of people would want to be in the chat talking about how good the Warriors are. it can go other ways as well. Like sometimes people like to vent their frustration, and I want you guys to do that. And you can talk about what moves this team needs to make. So it does work. It does work the other way sometimes as well. But I know for me, as a fan of the Warriors or any other sporting teams, like you just don't feel as engaged when your team is down and out and struggling, and when you just blatantly can't enjoy watching them play. Like it's as simple as that. Steve says, shame on the Warriors GM and coach. Get this man some help. Enough. Brody says the Warriors just have no threats, in my opinion. When I watch the Celtics or Cavs swing the ball, I know whoever catches it will be a threat to score. However, on our team, when the ball is in any of the bigs' hands, I know they're looking for a pass or handoff. Yeah. It's just so predictable. Yeah. Like you literally, again, it's 2025. You might be able to get away with having one non-shooting threat on the floor. You cannot get away with having multiple and too many lineups. And again, I'm not saying it's Steve's fault. Like he's forced to play these guys. It's the roster. Too many guys are just non-shooting threats, right? Which again is why Buddy Hield has to play, and that's just unfortunate. Like you look at the Warrior roster, you look at the guys that play tonight. Okay, Buddy Hield, no one really cares about him from three-point range right now because he's struggling that much. Wiggs, yeah, you send me respect, obviously, shooting the ball pretty well this season. Trace, no. Dennis, I'm playing off him at the moment. He can't hit water if he fell out of a boat. Steph, obviously. Looney, no. If Lindy Waters is taking a three, you're almost living with it if you're the offense. Moody, not really at the moment. Keith Santos, a bit like Lindy again. You live with it. Slow-mo, no. Draymond out injured, no. Kuminga, for as good as he is offensively, like, no. So, like, oh my goodness. Like, there's literally, like, the greatest shooter of all time on this team. There's one guy who can be a great shooter, but he's incredibly hot and cold in Buddy Hield. And everyone else is like, Wiggins, I suppose you can claim is a good shooter. The numbers are just appalling, though. For like, again, Lindy Waters came to this team as a known three-point shooter. And yes, he went 2 of 4 in this game, made a couple of big ones in the second half. But if you look at his percentages on the season, which I'll do right now, he's 33.3% after going 43.5% last season. Like, what is it? What is it with these guys that just come to the Warriors and you think, oh, okay, we're playing next to Steph. We're going to get a heap of open looks. And yet they just cannot improve their percentages. Like, Waters clearly worse. Schroeder was 38.7% with the Nets from 3. Like, what's going on there? I don't know. Thendic says Curry's stubborn. Small ball doesn't work anymore. Small ball works when you got shooters on the floor and you can space things out and make the opposing defense really work over time. The Warriors, like, when they play small, they've still got like non-shooting threats on the floor. The other guy, I failed to mention Gary Payton II, who should be back soon, shooting like 15% from 3 this season. Not a shooting threat. Abby or AB says, can we please get Steve Kerr out of San Francisco before he sinks this team? Yeah, I'm not sure he deserves some fault. Yes, I'm not sure it's entirely on him. I just think this roster is, to put it like Steph does, mid. This roster is mid. Brody says, do you feel like the regular season as a whole for the league has become more boring? I feel like I'm just waiting for the playoffs. The regular season has become more and more bland over the years. Possibly. The other thing as well with like the Warriors really struggling at the moment, like I watch every second of Warrior basketball, but I have found myself much less interested in other games around the association, around the league, and tuning into them than I was like at the start of the season. I think we're in that period. We're in that period right now where it's early mid-January and we're kind of, much of the focus is around the trade deadline and what we're going to see there rather than like actual on-court stuff. And so I think once the deadline passes and once we get into a mode where we can see the finish line of the season and we can really, map out the race to making the playoffs, that's when things start to become a bit more interesting again. It's exactly why, like right now is exactly why I don't understand the in-season tournament and when they schedule that. Why is the in-season tournament or the NBA Cup so early in the season? I said this last year when it first the first iteration of it. Why is it so early in the season? It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. Like it starts like 2 or 3 weeks into the season. It's like I'm still interested. I'm still invested in not just the Warriors, but the entire league at that point, right? This is when, right now is when the in-season tournament should be on, the NBA Cup. Like straight after Christmas, because like Christmas Day is big, cool, we get around that. Straight after Christmas, you have the NBA Cup go for a month in January, okay? And then you've got the trade deadline, and then after that, you can, the final rosters are formulated, and you can work out the race to try and make the playoffs, and things become a bit more interesting. Anyway, Jay Talk says they're absolutely done. Hard to disagree. Andrew says, fire Steve Kerr. The Warriors are down bad of a team. Brody says, it almost feels like the lack of big spacing is cancelling out Steph's gravity for our shooters. Good point. Paula says, let's be realistic. The season is done. Make the appropriate changes and start next season. Get rid of Buddy and Dennis ASAP. Yeah, I suppose if you're going to make a trade now before the deadline, do you have to try and do you make it based on next season rather than, you get a guy on an expiring contract or something, or even a guy like Vucevic, is that I would make that trade because he's still under contract for another year, and then you could come into next season and have a full year with him. But is something like that, does that become actually more and more pointless because this team's just not going anywhere? So what's the point? Is it a case of like, I personally think if you could buy low on Zion Williamson right now and you could try and steal him from the Pelicans because they're over him, I'd actually do that and just be like, well, I don't really care what you give me for the second half of the season. If you can get out on the floor, great. But I'm actually just more concerned about getting you more professional, about getting you with Rick Celebrini and the rest of the training staff and whatever else to actually get you in shape and fit and firing for next season. And then you come back next season with Steph, Zion, and whatever, and maybe you've got something just with those two guys. Who knows? Cornelis says, Buddy needs less minutes. Wiggs needs to get to basketball more. I'm saying it again. We need a two-guard who can halfway hoop. Buddy is trash. The season literally went down the drain when DeAnthony Melton got injured. Literally. Like, because even they won a couple of games after Melton, but they weren't convincing. Like, remember they won that NBA Cup game against, was it the Pelicans? I think, where the Pelicans were just like absolutely like had no one, and the Warriors like just held on. Like, I think someone had an attempt at the buzzer to beat them or something, and they won by like 2. And then they beat, I think they had a Hawks game that might have been close as well. I don't know, but they won a couple of games where it wasn't overly convincing, and there were some signs there that were like, oh, okay, hang on, this isn't trending in the right direction, even though they've won. So really, you can pinpoint the moment Melton went down as like that Mavs game. That was the high point of the Warriors season. Everything was going great, and then you hear like 2 days later, Melton out for the season. It's been downhill ever since. Paula says, Buddy needs 0 minutes. Trade him. Period. Red Sox says Lindy's a starter. Pods off the bench. Moody and Buddy DNPs. Moody's been really disappointing these last couple of games. Like, he just, I mean, Steve's spoken previously about his shot release and how slow it is, but it was really evident in this game against the Raptors' length that like he got blocked a couple of times on jump shots and just too slow a release. And then he's not twitchy enough to like get by guys either. Like, he's not good enough off the dribble. Like, he can attack a closeout and fly by guys and then try and get to the rim, but if he doesn't actually, if the guy doesn't bite on the fake or whatever, and he just can't get by guys, it's just, yeah, it's not great. Brody says that's a really good point on the NBA Cup because those games are really exciting. Would be meant to carry us through the summer holidays. Yeah, it should be. This is when the NBA Cup should be on. Doggy says no size, no athleticism, no defense, shooting, no center or small ball, and everyone is playing out of position. That's a great summary. That's it. No size, no athleticism, no defense, shooting, no center or small ball, and everyone is playing out of position. That's a great summary. Paula says Warriors will not make the playoffs. Not looking like this. Gamer FTP says I'm late. What did I miss? Oh, you missed nothing. You missed nothing good anyway. I don't know. What was good in this game? Can I just point out? So the Warriors lost the fourth 29-23. Their offensive execution down the stretch was god-awful again. And you know what? They were lucky to get to 23 because they had a loony, fadeaway jump shot over Pirtle in the final few minutes there. And then, 2 possessions later or something, Wiggins bailed them out with a BS deep 3. And I was thinking I actually saw those shots going, and I was like, we might win this game because they're just horrible offensive possessions, and we've been bailed out with absolute BS jump shots at the end, absolute bailouts from Loon and Wiggs. I thought, that might be a good sign. They shouldn't have even got to 20 points in that fourth quarter. That's how bad the offense was, because a couple of those possessions was so bad and they got bailed out at the end. Somehow got points out of them. Anyway, Abby says it's poor coaching. Why don't the other coaches please stand up and say something? Please, Steph, say something to the owners about the poor coaching. Yeah, it's really hard to tell externally, obviously, on how much influence guys have. What I will say is that I think it's unfair to Steve and I know you guys aren't going to like me defending Steve Kerr based on what we've been seeing, but I think it's really unfair to go from the first 15 games of the season where the Warriors were 12-3, where I think a lot of the credit from fans particularly went to Terry Stotts and Jerry Stackhouse for how the offense and defense were working. And then I think it's unfair for when the team starts losing to then just blame Steve entirely, right? And then say that, Terry Stotts and Jerry Stackhouse have to have more influence. There has to be a balance there between, I'm okay if you want to just blame or appreciate Steve Kerr based on whether they're winning or losing, then that's fine. But you can't just think it's, the assistant coaches are great when we're winning and then just actually blame the head coach when we're losing. So there's got to be a balance there. I don't know. I just think this roster is fundamentally flawed. I think a new head coach might bring something different and might help you a little bit. But, let's be honest, this roster isn't a championship caliber roster. Simple as that. Gamer F2P says, can we lobby for Kerr to sit out for a 12-game sample size? Doggy says, no, 3&D. Gamer F2P says, the problem is Kerr and media personnel don't point this out and continue to ignore this is just as bad or worse. Paul says, don't acquire Zion. He doesn't show up. Shaq at one point said he's a football player, not an NBA player. Yeah, look, the risks are huge. Don't get me wrong. Absolutely huge risks. But it also means, because of the risk, you could get an absolute steal. What if he was to get traded and a new environment just unleashed him? Not unleashed him, but, got him on the straight and narrow a little bit and woke him up a little bit into being a better professional and a better athlete in the way he conducts himself. I feel like if you could get him right in that aspect, then the talent is undeniable. He's 25 points a game in his career, nearly 60% shooting from the floor. Theoretically makes sense with Steph in terms of Zion's brutal interior dominance and Steph's shooting. Now, you'd still have to put the appropriate pieces around those guys, but that would be dangerous. And I'm not saying I trade multiple first-round picks or anything for him. I'm just saying if you could basically just do it for matching salary, then why not? Bobby says, at this point, I'm ready for a trade. Vooch, Levine, it's something to look at. Got to include Moody and Dennis. Dennis can't be traded until February 5, 24 hours before the deadline. Connor says, Wiggs needs to go to the basket more. Jay Talk says, the front office and ownership had years to build around Steph. They chose to do nothing and double down on their weaknesses. Now they need to hit a home run and act like this was unavoidable. Good point. Gamer FTP says, as a head coach, you shouldn't be saying that about your players. I think that affects Moody. Yeah, like I remember going back to the end of last season after that Kings loss, and Steve was asked about some guys, and particularly about Moody and his lack of playing time and what he needs to do in order to get more playing time. And I thought that was good, because too many times I think we hear Steve in regards to Moses, he just says, oh, look, it's a deep rotation and he's going to be ready for his opportunity and blah, 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 just drums out the same line. Like, Steve actually telling us, hey, this is the reasons why he doesn't get minutes, I think is a good thing, to be honest. Like, saying that publicly, because he's saying that privately anyway. Like, him saying that publicly, I think, as long as he does it, and I suppose the issue is if you're just singling out Moses, like, if you did that for every player, then I like that clarity. And particularly as like fans, analysts of the game, like you want to understand why guys aren't getting minutes. And if a head coach can deliver that to you, then I think that's a good thing. Brody says, good point on Zion. Shut the season down. Tank, get a pick and trade for Zion. Give him the whole season off to get in shape with our trainers and come into next season firing. Gamer F2P says, legend has it, Kerr still tinkering 10 years in. Doggy says, the fixes will take 2 to 3 years. You have to trade this season to start somewhere. Terrence says, in crunch time, Steph took only one shot and made it. Why don't they run more plays for him during crunch time? Are they already trying to tank? It's a good point. I just think, like, because of the lack of spacing and the lack of shooting threats on the floor, I actually think it's just legit so hard to get Steph open. Like, when you say run plays for Steph, it's like, it's hard to get the guy open because so much of the defense is just focused on him. And they can be focused on him because there's no, like, they say, oh, all right, well, we're just going to leave Trace Jackson-Davis or Gary Payton II when he's out there. Or even Lindy Waters, Buddy Hield. At the moment, opposing defenses are like, you know what, those guys are kind of known as three-point shooters, but the numbers this season suggest, or at least the numbers over the last 25 games, suggest, like, more often than not, they're going to miss their threes. And so I just think it's actually hard to run plays for Steph because that's what the defenses are just loading up for. And it's actually pretty hard to get him open sometimes. Like, a lot of these shots Steph's taking are pretty tough shots. Like, he had a good game, 26 points, 9 of 17 shooting from the floor. Like, he played well. I felt sorry for him. I felt legit sorry for him in this game because he was fighting through so much stuff and still proved pretty effective. And yet, no one really came along for the ride, aside from Wiggins, maybe, who had 20. Brody says, it makes me wonder how big Melton's influence was in the locker room with firing guys up. Again, we don't know, and it is a wonder on the chemistry aspect of it in the locker room and stuff like that. But you can just blatantly see it from an on-court perspective. Like, you have a guy who is a good three-point shooter and like a consistent three-point shooter. Like, DeAnthony Melton to me was always going to be a guy who you could reliably say was going to be 37 to 40% from three-point range throughout a season. Like, he wasn't going to have these huge stretches like Buddy Hield has had where he's, 60% for 1 week and then 15% the next week, like that kind of thing. So he was always like a pretty reliable three-point shooter, pretty high volume-ish one as well. And then like a really good perimeter defender. And like, you could put the ball in his hands and he could kind of make plays and it could look okay, rather than like these other two guards that they've got, Moody, Hield, Waters. If they put the ball on the floor, I'm like literally turning my head away and saying, I don't want to watch this because it's disgusting. It's, as I mentioned, as I referred to it last post-game live, it's a train wreck. It's a train wreck whenever those guys put the ball on the floor. Something good happens 1 every 10 times. That's pretty much what it is. Gamer FTP says, got to blame Steve. Know why Draymond was out. You would think you would start Slow-Mo, who is Draymond's natural replacement. Yeah, you're probably right. But again, the spacing, like, there's just no perfect answers because if you start Anderson and TJD together with Schroeder, who can't hit threes either at the moment, tough. Paul says, by the way, I just want to give a shout out to your podcast. I love it. Good analysis and discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good to hear some positivity on after a game of so much negativity. Arch says, what would you be willing to give up? Is that in regard to Zion? If that's in regard to Zion, I think it would be, or are you just saying in general? Just let me know. Is that in general or for Zion specifically, or for any player specifically? Gamer F2P says, what about Lindy hitting back-to-back threes in the fourth, but took him out and kept him, buddy, who was putrid all night? What are your thoughts on that? Are we all on board with Mr. Logjam? Brackets Kerr. Yeah, good. Buddy Hield closing the game. Just no thanks. No thanks. So I agree with that. Like, I'm agreeing that Steve has his fair share of blame on this. I just don't think it's all him, and I don't think a new head coach is necessarily going to change things too much. Archers, so in regards to Zion, the issue is the salary. Obviously, I think he's got $36.7 million this season. It would have to be one of Wiggins or Draymond. I think there is a version of a trade that I've come up with where it's like Looney, GP2, Slow-Mo, Hield, and Schroeder. So those five guys make like a combined $45 million. And then you could get Zion and then like Javonte Green, Daniel Tice, like just a few players that make minimum chips. And it could basically be like a 5-for-4 trade or something like that. And that actually interests me because if you could just like get rid of those 5 role players, get Zion and actually keep Draymond and Wiggs, then you've got something, right? Cuts out your depth, but like, what is the depth right now? Like, the depth sucks anyway. So there is a version of a trade like that. I just don't think that either team, like, there's not going to be a 9 or 10 player 2-team trade. It's just not. Like, that's so unrealistic. That's not going to happen. So it would have to be one of Wiggins or Draymond. You might need a third team involved because I'm not sure the Pelicans might take Wiggins, but then like you're left. I actually think, and I've spoken about it before, I'd almost prefer to give up Draymond. I know that is pretty harsh to say given what he's meant to the franchise, but just in terms of the on-court basketball fit, having Wiggins alongside Steph and Zion, I think makes a lot more sense. But then you've got the defensive concerns. I don't know. Like, the issue with Zion is you need a shooting big next to him. So you'd have to make another move for a stretch 5 or hope that Quentin Post takes this massive leap over the offseason, is all of a sudden a starting caliber center for you next season. Won't happen. Maybe like go and just like Brook Lopez. I don't know why Brook Lopez would come to the Warriors in free agency, but like Brook Lopez, hey, you want to come to the Warriors on a minimum, play next to Zion and be like that, basically what he is for Giannis right now. He wouldn't do it, but that's like the dream. Something along those lines. But yeah, in terms of the trade, I don't think the Warriors are clearly not going to be able to do a 9-player 2-team trade. And I also don't think the Warriors are going to be willing to give up Draymond for Zion. Not sure they'd give up Wiggins for Zion either. So I just don't see it happening, but I don't know. I just think you need that and it also comes like, what are you doing with Kuminga in that scenario? Because I don't think you'd have to give up Kuminga in a Zion trade necessarily, but then are you paying both guys who are both interior forces? Maybe not. I don't know. Daniel says, I agree the pod is great. I'm not even Australian, but really good analysis and talks. Thank you, Daniel. Paula says, I'd give up Buddy and Dennis. Dennis isn't adapting to Warriors basketball. Buddy is just unreal. Poor at Indy and at Sacramento. Carl says, should have let Steve retire and promoted Kenny. And he's got the Cavs firing right now. That might be a good article idea. Thanks for that. Paula says, I wouldn't give up Draymond, to be fair. Ash says, do you think our spacing would be too bad? I would want Vooch as well. Yeah, if you got Vucevic, Zion, but then like, if he's like, what are you doing with Draymond and Kuminga? Like, there's just adding Zion to the mix, like, interests me, but you'd have to change the team up pretty significantly because, again, like, there's just, you'd struggle to have 2 of Kuminga, Draymond, and Zion together, let alone all 3, obviously. So one of them would have to go. I don't know. Paula says, Draymond makes Steph. The chemistry between them is unique. Yeah, I agree with that. Brody says Lindy Waters for Wembanyama. Who says no? I reckon the Warriors, they're pretty invested in Lindy Waters at the moment. Paula says I'd part with my tech bonus to give up Buddy. Right now, I'll stop with Buddy. Daniel says, would you trade for Devin Booker if he became available? Just thinking for star-level players that might have lower value in the league right now. Absolutely, I'd trade for Devin Booker. Suns would want an absolute haul. I'd probably give it to them too because he's young enough. He can take the keys off Steph. I actually really like what he did in the Olympics as kind of not that star player and the guy who actually really invested in defense and played off the ball a lot. That really, I think, put him a step above in my books in terms of the way I viewed him. Now, I don't think he's having a great season necessarily with the Suns, but you got a fair sample size of him being an all-star, fantastic, elite level offensive player. Absolutely, I'd trade for Devin Booker. I don't think the Suns would be doing it, though. Gamer of 2P, Levine would fit perfectly with Steph. I just don't want to talk about Levine because the Warriors just could have had him in the offseason for like Chris Paul and GP2 and Loon maybe, and probably got to pick themselves in the process, and that's just disgusting. Oh, my goodness. Sharia, that's how I want to pronounce it. Sorry if I've pronounced it wrong. Yeah, I'm new here, but Zion is a nope. He's mentally so immature. Yes, he's also only 24, so maybe he does eventually grow up at some point. And then he could be really dangerous for you. Like if he gets things right, again, as I said previously, 10 minutes ago, like there's no doubting his on-court talent. He's 25 points a game for his career. Brody says, crazy league when the Pistons are one of the best teams to watch and the Warriors are one of the worst teams to watch. Yeah, new era. Sharia says we'd have to give up too much for Zion. I think she's saying that in regard to Booker. The Suns aren't doing it. Archers, I would trade Dre. The Dre-Steph two-man game is too predictable and outdated. I doubt you can sell the Pelicans on a Dre for Zion trade without Kuminga, though. Yeah, it's just hard to say, like, are the Pelicans that sick of Zion where they just want out of the Zion experience? That's the only way I trade for him. Where, as I said before, like, if it's pretty much just salary matching and you don't have to, maybe you give up one first-round pick. Okay, but otherwise, like, if I'm trading for Zion, I'm doing it just to take him off the Pelicans' hands. I'm not giving up value for him as such. I'm just doing it if the Pelicans are, like, well and truly sick of him. Paula says Book would be unreal. In Paris, he was brilliant. Yep. Daniel says Zion is a top 5 player in the world talent. I'd risk it even with the off-court stuff. Yeah, I think I'd risk it because he's also that young. Like, he's 24. And so that tells me, okay, maybe he is immature and unprofessional, but it's not like he's been doing it for 10 years. Like, he's been doing it for 5. So he could still turn it around at some point. And the on-court talent is that good that it might be worth the risk. And again, because he's 24, he's young enough. I think the Warriors have an issue. Like, part of the reason they don't want to trade for Jimmy Butler is, like, he's 35. And they still do have an eye to the future. And we can argue whether or not it's right to have an eye to the future. Most people would say, no, let's just prioritize Steph. And I get that. But the reality is the franchise clearly is looking past Steph. And so I think with any of these trades for star players, I think their age is really is a factor. And therefore, Zion being 24, that gives the Warriors the perfect opportunity to buy low, potentially on a guy who could not only be a really big, huge help to Steph right now, but can also be a 10 to 12 year player for you and take the keys off Steph when the time's right. Daniel Hall says Brick Celebrini can get him right health-wise. I'm not even sure if it's like a health thing. I think it's like, it's a conditioning thing and him being willing to put in the work. It's crazy how athletic he is for a guy his size and for a guy who sounds like is as unprofessional as he is, it's just crazy, really. It's, all really, I suppose, he's just born with it. Like, it's just all natural. So it's kind of, I don't want to compare myself to Zion Williamson, but I'm a bigger guy. Like, I'm 95 to 100 kilos, but I ran 10Ks, which is 7 miles for you guys in America. 10 kilometers last week in like 45 minutes, which is relatively good pace. I think that'd be well above average. And so I like to think that not my athleticism, but my running capability is certainly quite good for a guy that is naturally built more like someone who should be into strength training, I suppose, and who has a bit of a beer gut naturally, I suppose. Trying to work on that though. Brody says, I'm more surprised more players don't want to join the Warriors and play alongside Steph, considering what he did in Paris and him being known as an unselfish superstar. Yeah, the issue now is, though, like, I think players would look at the Warriors and think, okay, but yes, they've got Steph, but he's also 36, and who else have we got? Am I really making this much of a difference? Like, would Jimmy Butler look at the Warriors now and say, yeah, I really want to go there because, I think that I'm capable of pushing this team from a 500 team to a championship contender? Now, maybe some stars that are built the right way would actually take on that challenge and prefer that over, joining. It's going to really sound like I'm throwing shade at KD here, but rather than joining a team that's already towards the top, apologize to Kevin Durant for the stray there, but maybe some stars would take on that challenge. Shreya says, I'm cool with ditching Anderson in any trade, and buddy, Jimmy is way too much of a gamble for the culture, and I love Jimmy. The trade that Bleacher Report's Greg Swartz proposed today was simply Looney, Payton, and slow-mo for Vucevic. And if that was on the table, like, you'd just make that trade now. You should make that trade ASAP. But I don't think the Bulls are doing that without draft picks or a guy like Moody involved. And even then, I'm not sure. Where's Moody's value right now as a player? Don't know. Bobby says, what do you think of a trade involving Naz Reid and Dante to the Warriors for Kyle Anderson and Dennis Schroeder? Oh, yeah, sign me up. Sign me up. Again, Timberwolves aren't doing it whatsoever. I could see I think they actually do miss slow-mo a little bit, and maybe Mike Conley's just that washed. They need a proper point guard like Dennis Schroeder, and maybe he fits better in the Timberwolves system. Dante's in the starting lineup now, and I think that fits a lot better for him because, yes, he's taken over Mike Conley's spot in the starting lineup, but he gets to play off Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards rather than be like this backup point guard, which he's just not suited to. Sheree says, Zion is so talented but not disciplined enough. I hate that. Again, maybe a change of scenery could change it. Paula says it would be so cool, though, Ant-Man plus Curry. Brody says Desmond, should have traded up in 2020. Hindsight is always annoying to look on as a fan. Yeah, I mean, they could have, the draft lottery just didn't fall. They had the worst record that season. Would have been so good, like a Steph Ant backcourt right now. This is probably time for me to finish up the podcast because now we're so disappointed with how the Warriors are going currently that we're just going back to hypothetical scenarios from history. Jamu says, as dysfunctional as this team is and with this coach, Vucevic can't save us. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think that's part of the reason why I suppose some people don't want the trade is like, okay, what's that even going to do for you? I just think it would present a really different look just something different. Just something different. It's not a superstar caliber player by any means, but it doesn't look like the Warriors are chasing that. It just brings something different. And Steve said it after the loss to the Pacers. Like he said, it was really nice to see a stretch five on the floor in this center who can, oh my God, he's shooting the ball from beyond the arc. What's this about? And he spoke about it. It was almost, to me, it was a hint to say, okay, it might not be Quentin Post because he doesn't have the experience yet at this point and needs some more development, but it needs to be someone there that can shoot the ball from distance and actually be respected by opposing defenses. Daniel says, the real question is, would we trade for Joel Embiid? Former MVP could be washed on, makes $50 million. No, I'm not trading for Embiid. I know there's a lot of the same similar issues with Zion, but Zion's younger to me and he's on slightly less of a contract right now. Embiid, I don't want any interest in that. Joey says, as usual, Kerr started the Hobbit 3-guard lineup, then kept Buddy in a closing lineup when he stunk up the whole game. Yeah. That's of all the Steve decisions, the starting lineup and the closing lineup, which I think are obviously clearly the most glaring ones, that they were not good. Brody says, what would an incoming package look like for Steph? Can't happen right now. Can't happen right now because he signed that extension in the offseason, which makes him trade ineligible until the offseason. And I don't want to talk about it. It's just going to make I'm sad enough and disappointed enough as it is. Let's not talk about that. Um, Daniel says, I don't want a Steph trade. He should retire a Warrior if he wants to. Yeah, they're not going to trade him. They're not going to trade him unless he asks out. And again, he can't ask. Fortunately, he can't ask out before the deadline. That can't happen. Valet says, why was Buddy getting so many crucial minutes? Just no one else offensively. No one, and not that the Buddy Hield offense is any good, but like the reliance on him offensively is too much. Sharia says, Buddy in his minutes grind my gears. Brody says, I agree with that. He should go out on his terms and retire as a Warrior in regards to Steph, but what kind of young player could we get in return for the future? Valet says, Curry had a really bad turnover in the clutch. The turnovers, there weren't a heap of turnovers. There's only 14 on the box score, but there were some really bad ones. And ones where you can tell like the chemistry is just all off. Like just simple ones, like you just dribbling the ball up the floor, and I'm like, okay, I'll just pass to this guy, and this guy's not even looking, and the ball just goes out of bounds. It's like, what are we doing? Anyway, I'm going to finish it up there. We've been going for over 50 minutes. I've got a haircut appointment to actually get to, so I better get off to that. Thank you very much to everyone who has commented, or if you're watching on replay, or if you're listening via the podcast feed. Much appreciate the ongoing support, and particularly for you guys with some of the nice comments in the comments after a game that was not good at all. The Warriors losing 104-101 to the Toronto Raptors. They play the Timberwolves. Speaking of Anthony Edwards, they face Minnesota on Wednesday at Target Center before returning home and hosting Jordan Poole and the Wizards later in the week. I'll be back. If there's any trade-related stuff that comes up between now and the Timberwolves game, I'll make sure to jump on and do a podcast episode to cover that. But otherwise, post-game live after the Timberwolves game. Tell you what, after what we just watched in the last 3 hours, not too confident on that being a good result for the Warriors. Thanks again, guys.